Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
What's up, my guys? Hawkeye pro tip of the day. Have you ever seen a beautiful girl and wanted to get her number, but your social anxiety held you back? I have a solution. Act like you're in a hurry. It always works. Here's what to do. Locate the hot girl. Maybe she's in line at a coffee shop. Approach. Say something like, hey, do you know what's good on the menu here? Let her answer. Make light conversation. And after a few back and forths, act like you're in a hurry to leave. Maybe it's an important meeting. Perfect excuse. You look like you're high value and in high demand. This is the perfect time to secure the phone number. It was so great talking to you. I actually have to run to my meeting, but do you want to exchange numbers so we can continue this conversation? It takes the pressure off the conversation. You won't overstay your welcome, and you'll have more time to think about conversation topics. You're welcome.
Because it is your place, you're also responsible for everybody here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to grab your info.
Yeah.
And if I do have to come back here, a $300 some ticket's coming your way.
Okay.
And it only gets more expensive from there. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fair. Absolutely.
Actually, let's just do it this. What's a good phone number for you? What's a good phone number for you? What's a good phone number for you? Is this 1122 here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. I'd much rather you spend that $300 on beer or something fun then. I'd much rather you spend that $300 on beer or something fun then.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And I have you a barn burner in this one, folks. This is one you need to tie yourself down to the chair so that you don't blow yourself away, because I'm going to go over some information in this one. And I did a video the other day on the crime scene recreation, and I made the statement at the beginning of the video. This is my final determination on what I believe happened at the crime scene. And whenever you hear me say final determination, well, that is what I'm literally suggesting happened based on an unbelievable mountain of data. And I also mentioned in the beginning of the video, there's no way I could go through every data point as I explain this scenario, but I would try to give you enough. Well, I realized that that's not nearly enough for a lot of people. And also, let me just say this. I know a lot of people, I get comments and say, well, Pop, you change your ideas, your stories all the time. Yeah, I do, based on new evidence that's released. And if you don't adjust based on actual witness statements, I mean, after we've heard what we think they've said for so long, then we actually literally hear what they really said. I mean, if you don't adjust based on that new evidence, then you're perpetually wiping your butt with a hula hoop. We've had nothing but theories up to this point about even what was said. Now that we know what was actually said by these people, it opens all new doors. Once we actually get the forensic reports that tells us everything we need to know, it opens new doors. So if you do not adjust based on the new information, then you're not being true to the case, in my humble opinion. But in this video, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do something that I've told y'all I was going to do. And this is something I've been working on for months. If you go way back to a video series that I started months ago, I got through part 1 and part 2, and then I just stopped because I wanted to wait till all this new information came out. And now that we have it, I've got what I believe is a lot clearer picture of the circumstances around what really went down. And this is something that I have a lot of trouble getting across to people, because they say, well, you can't believe anything Dylan and Bethany say. I don't believe that. I believe you can believe quite a bit of what they say up until the atrocity. I believe the second the atrocity is over is where all those things that you shouldn't believe about the things that is said is right where it starts. I believe it's nothing but lies after the atrocity, right up to the 911 call, and there's some lies in the investigating beyond that. So you have to ask yourself, if the cover-up started as soon as the atrocity was over, why? And why do you say, Pop, that you believe Kaylee was unalived downstairs and she was moved upstairs by not the assailants, but likely personnel of law enforcement and the university? Some very select personnel. I don't believe everybody had access to this information, and it probably confused a lot of the people that didn't. So what I want to do in this video is I want to give you the proof behind why I say this thing happened this way. And I need you to sit back, keep your eyes and ears open, open your mind, because I'm about to go through and show you when I say that I have so many data points to my conclusions. Well, you're going to get just a little bit of insight to what I mean when I say I have so many data points to my conclusions. I'm going to give you a bunch of them just on this one subject. Ready? Let's go.
Are there any, I know they don't, I mean, have to be specifically dating. Were there any males that Kaylee would hang out with pretty often, or any pretty close guy friends that she would hang out pretty often or have come over or anything like that?
Let's see. I think she was talking to this guy for a little bit. He's here.
Okay.
But
They were just like talking, like they had a thing, like they weren't like officially dating, or
yeah, I think
okay.
they were just.
Do you know if they were like had a sexual relationship or anything?
Yeah, I think they were just hooking up like there and there. Yeah.
Okay.
Like it wasn't really a thing.
Okay.
Have you seen him before?
Yeah.
What's he look like?
Tall. He's brunette. He's serving as like their like right now.
So tall, is that like 6 foot?
Like over 6 feet. Yeah.
Okay. Is he thicker build, skinny,
I'd say medium.
athletic, or just kind of?
Yeah.
Not like he's not like overweight or
No. Or
like
super skinny. No.
Okay.
He's just average odd.
Now, I'm not saying during that interview with Miss Nguyen that she was saying that Kaylee was seeing Rosie there, but I certainly can't rule it out considering they redacted everything that we could have determined who she was talking about, and she perfectly described the physical features of Rosie. So we hear that a lot in the interviews that we listen to now, since a lot of them have been released. But there's certain things that I've picked up on going through, just looking at the actual interviews and the police reports, and it brought up a couple of questions in my mind that I'll address here in a minute. But first of all, I can go to just a couple of examples from police reports. One is from Showalter. And of course, this is just my opinion of what could be in these blacked out blanks. Some of them I know for sure. Some of them are, just what kind of fits in the blank the best. And when we look at it, it says, I asked Showalter, and I know this is a excerpt from the Showalter statement, but he asked Showalter if he had any knowledge about Kaylee having a sexual relationship with and I think the best word that fits right here is coach. But with a coach, but it could be a cop, it could be a professor, but you can bet it's somebody of stature the way that it's written here. And Showalter stated he had heard rumors, but thought they were weird because the rumor he had heard was Kaylee was involved with a police officer or professor. Now, of course, this could be something else, could be coach. I mean, they just seem to kind of fit, though. And he understood Kaylee was, and see this little quotation here? Not really a quotation, but I forgot what that thing's called. The one quotation. He understood Kaylee could be single, could be hoeing, could be a lot of things right here. But Showalter believed it to be, and that's why I say single doesn't even really fit right here, because Showalter believed it to be an outlandish rumor. So he understood Kaylee was something here that was an outlandish rumor. That's why I believe that could be hoeing. But he believed it to be an outlandish rumor, and it would be more believable if it was a police officer. Showalter again informed us he did not really know Kaylee and did not know if she had a job. So I find that to be kind of interesting. And there's a lot of rumors going around, I guess, about who Kaylee was seeing. But then we get down to this one. And this is, I don't remember exactly who this was, somebody that was close to Kaylee, but it says one of the most profound things that I had seen about this subject in any of the reports. And it talks about, somebody pretty well will be done in a semester. He and Kaylee, that's probably Jack Decor pretty well. He and Kaylee started talking about a month prior to the unalivings. No, that's probably not Jack Decor. She would come back with him and stay at the fraternity. So this is the little guy she was seeing at the fraternity. They talked on Saturday at the pregame party for the football game, where Kaylee apologized to him and wanted to go to the game with him. But he already had plans to go to a sorority formal that evening with somebody else. And Kaylee texted him that night, and he ignored it. So it wasn't Jack D, it was this other guy. Kaylee was pretty drunk on Saturday. She was probably texting others to hang out as well. So for some reason, they believe that Kaylee on the night in question had been drinking and she was really wanting to get together with somebody. But this youngster at the fraternity already had plans and he was ignoring her texts. So she assumed she was texting other people to come and hang out with her. And those texts were through Snapchat. Snapchat deletes after 24 hours, of course. They mainly use Snapchat. They'll create 40-person groups in Snapchat to communicate. So I think that one was that's just something big. One of her friends thinks that she was texting people that night because she wanted to get together with somebody because this one already blew her off. So it made me really start to think when looking at all these statements and listening to everything everybody said. And I had really two questions in my mind. Did Kaylee, and I alluded to this in videos before, did she have a side hustle? Maybe something with that computer, maybe meeting up with people to earn extra income? Or was Kaylee earning enough and was just going wild after a 6-year relationship ended with her boyfriend and she was sowing her young oats after that long relationship? And this one was kind of tough for me and I needed a little bit more information to form my determination. So I went through and I dug. And when I look at this police report, this is talking about when she sold her vehicle for $6,500 cash. And this person said she heard Kaylee tell her dad she was going to keep the money. And anyway, she sold the car, $6,500. And then in this one, it gives us a little bit more detail. And it tells us she'd booked tickets with Gonzalez, this is another young lady, to go to Europe together. So they had booked tickets to Europe approximately 3 weeks prior to the unalivings. And Gonzalez had recently sold her Subaru, so this one says 63, the other one says 65, they're pretty close, to a man at Facebook Marketplace. And she had purchased the Range Rover the previous day. Says Gonzalez was making good money, but a Range Rover seemed expensive. Gonzalez was recently offering to buy drinks for friends quite often. So this made me, kind of go, huh? I mean, booking a trip to Europe, purchasing a car, which we now know that she used that $6,500 to put down on the Range Rover, and her grandmother gave her another $1,000 on her credit card so that she could get the payments down pretty good. So it was just kind of interesting. But buying a lot of drinks, booked a trip to Europe, we've heard a lot about Kaylee's money. So, it made me question things. So I go to this Idaho State Police report where it talks about them talking to the finance manager of the vehicle that she bought. And it says she put down $6,500 in cash, put $1,000 on a credit card, and she put on her credit application that she made $3,200 a month. as a blank for a blank and had been working for them for 5 months at that time. And according to the person at the dealership, Kaylee was a first-time buyer, so her credit was good, and she got the loan. And they were going to take the car back, and the dealership put $1,000 back on the grandmother's credit card, but then they found out they were keeping the car, so they took the $1,000 back out of the grandmother's credit card, and Kaylee declined the extended warranty, which was very smart. But when I looked at this and I said, okay, $3,200 a month. So I did the math, and you take $3,200 in gross income, multiply it times 0.68, because you figure 32% in federal, state, and Social Security benefits. It's usually about 32% on $3,200. So that would leave her roughly $2,176 bring home if she worked, if she earned $3,200 a month. And then when you factor in, the rent she was paying or utilities, we've heard statements that Kaylee paid for her own school. Now, she probably, did a lot of that, I imagine, like most youngsters do with student loans. That may have covered some of her rent as well. But then she was adding a car payment, insurance on that car payment. And then she's got, just life expenses, buying a lot of people drinks, and she just booked a trip to Europe. So when I looked at that, I went, well, $2,176, now she'd be in the negative. So that wouldn't be affordable. Maybe she does have a side hustle. So I had to investigate further. So I went to this report, and this person says that they had telephonically interviewed somebody and explained how she has known Kaylee from Coeur d'Alene. And although she was a couple years ahead of Kaylee in school, they were good friends and the sororities. And once it got down here and it started talking about her job, about the Texas company and everything, I noticed this on December 15th. I spoke with somebody, and I imagine this is somebody at the place Kaylee worked, and they facilitated victim Kaylee Gonzalez's knowledge about salary negotiations, but did not directly negotiate her salary with her. And she believed Kaylee was in a full-time paid intern program at the company and was being paid between $20 to $27 per hour. Now, she leaned towards the $27 per hour. And I went, okay, well, if Kaylee's making $27 per hour and she's working 40 hours a week, and there's 4.3 weeks in a month, then that puts her gross income about $46.76. So when Kaylee put on her application for the vehicle at $3,200, she did what almost nobody ever does, and she put her net income and not her gross. So that would be pretty close to a net income of $3,200, which told me, well, Kaylee can't afford all that. That's good money. So I lean more towards, as my final determination based on that Kaylee was just making good money. That means she wasn't doing, in my opinion, things on the side. She was just sowing her young oats, and she seemed to be seeing several different people, according to witness statements, as you listen to them over and over and over again. So that brought up some new questions. So I've already had my suspicions about Officer Rosendahl, but is it quite possible that there are some people that are employed by the university that Kaylee could have perhaps been, had a type of relationship with that would be very scandalous for the university if word got out about it? And when I go to this one, and I believe there's no way for me to prove it or verify it because of all the redactions, but I believe this particular report has something to do with somebody that's involved in a leadership role with what's called the Vandal Solutions program. And I won't get into why I believe that right now, but it talks about on December 9th that ISP Detective Powell interviewed somebody regarding his interactions with Kaylee. And Kaylee had been in something from January to March, which, it's quite possible. I believe that could have been Vandal Solutions. But anyway, Detective Powell and I met with them, and they were located in Moscow. And what follows is a summary of the interview. He first met Kaylee in January of 2022, and she was placed somewhere by the University of Idaho as something which was part of the requirements of her probably bachelor's degree. Gonzalez was initially timid and struggled to connect with something which he attributed to complications of the COVID-19 lockdowns. Gonzalez did something titled Fun Festivals of Africa during her time as something. The only time he had contact with Gonzalez outside of their professional relationship was when he took his 3 daughters and wife to Gonzalez's sorority house, so his daughter could sell chocolate bars to the sorority as a fundraising event for an international trip. The only communications he had with Gonzalez was regarding her role as whatever this was, and was typically via text message, which I find interesting that he was having conversations via text message with Kaylee and her phone. He will periodically take students to get coffee after they successfully complete whatever they're doing, but he couldn't remember definitively if he had taken Gonzalez to coffee during her time. He couldn't remember the exact dates, but knew Gonzalez was something from January to March. On the night of November 12th and into the early morning hours of November 13th, he was at home with his family. He was with his 3 daughters at home while his wife was at a ladies' night from 6 to 10. He put his children to bed about 9. Then he went to bed shortly after. When his wife arrived home at 10, he was already asleep in bed. He called his wife while we were speaking and placed her on speaker, and she provided the same information as he provided. So that's what you call an alibi. So keep in mind, as I go through this, I'm not picking out suspects why things would be covered up. This is where everybody goes off the rails and they think everybody is a suspect. People with alibis aren't suspects. So you got to think outside of the box. Now, this person was initially agreeable to providing his DNA exclusionary sample, but was hesitant to allow his cellular telephone to be forensically extracted. I bet he was, considering he's already admitted to having text message conversations with Kaylee. So that is a red flag right there. And he had to leave, but he agreed to provide the DNA sample later that evening after discussing the matter of the cell phone extraction with his wife. And about 5 p.m., he contacted me and told me he intended to seek legal counsel before providing the DNA sample or allowing his cell phone to be forensically extracted. He told me he would contact me on December 12th to finalize his decision. On December 12th or December 13th, he contacted him by phone because he didn't contact him like he was supposed to. And he told me he did not believe he'd done anything wrong. He'd been a good Samaritan by allowing Gonzalez to be something, and he didn't understand why he was on the contact list in the first place. Therefore, he was declining to provide his DNA sample or phone extraction. And this is my number one suspect, but it could be more than just this one, that was having an improper relationship with Kaylee. And you can tell by the way he doesn't want to give his DNA or his phone, because if he did, he's scared that his DNA would have come up around Kaylee. But it doesn't mean he is the unaliver, because he has an alibi for that night. But it does mean that he likely had an improper relationship with Kaylee, and he knew that would be discovered through his DNA and his phone, and that would have been a pretty dang big scandal for somebody in power in the university. There's reason number one to cover things up after the unalivings, because improper relationships between faculty and students that were unalived in a horrible way would be a very tricky ground for the university to, or very, how should I say this? It would be very rough waters for them to tread. And there's one example. And I want to point out, most of these that I'm going over in these scenarios are statements taken by the Idaho State Police that I believe are totally out of the loop of any cover-ups that were taking place. And that is one way for an agency like MPD and the university to cover things up, is they keep information away from the other investigating agency, and as they're investigating, they could keep information away from them, and all they're going to have is suspicions, but the case agent's going to make the final determination, which is MPD Brett Payne. On December 8th, Detective William Adams of the Idaho State Police, along with Detective Joe Lake, interviewed this person. Date of birth 2001. They were identified by others as someone who was a babysitter for some of the football coaches. That person who, excuse me, who, in order to either babysit or get babysitters for them, Kaylee Gonzalez was identified as being one of the babysitters used. As stated, she was only aware of one family that Gonzalez worked for as a babysitter. She identified that family as, what, the football coach, or what does she identify them at? Explained that she had met them while working in the recruiting department for the University of Idaho. The recruiting department, huh? Is that Vandal Solutions when she met him as well? And that person's date of birth was 1985, and he was a something there, and was also involved in the recruiting department. And she told me that they met one day in the hallways when he approached her about being a babysitter, and somebody agreed to babysit and ultimately met them. And she explained she was the primary babysitter and coordinated with them in scheduling other girls to babysit. And they created spreadsheets and time slots for other girls to babysit. Wow, spreadsheets and time slots for babysitting. These people really had a lot of kids, I guess. And they were the main contact for each girl when they babysat. Sounds interesting. And they went on to explain that Gonzalez babysit for that person during the summer of 2022. She was unsure how many times Gonzalez babysat, but knew it was many. Very interesting. Let's move forward. All right, so when we go to this follow-up interview with those people, we see that Gonzalez had been a babysitter for a family in Moscow during the summer of 2022. Seems like the same ones. The family, and it gives their date of birth, and their two children lived at, whoa, wait a minute. Their two children. This family only has two children? What did we just look at? Okay, this other one said that this lady that was given the statement explained that she was the primary babysitter and coordinated with that family in scheduling other girls to babysit. She literally created spreadsheets with time slots for other girls to babysit. And she was the main contact for each girl when they babysat. Sound like Heidi Fleiss right here, scheduling time slots for other girls to babysit using spreadsheets for two kids. Man, either these people are never ever at home, or their two kids are hellions. I mean, hellions. Let's see, 1985 and 1988. Yeah, they're not spring chickens. How old are these kids? All right, so back to this one, which I think this one is the most suspicious one in here. After the interview, he obtained their phone numbers. He requested the cast agents to check the time frame for which they had cell phone data at the time. And their data appeared to place their phone at their residence on the night of the unalivings. However, when I checked their phone data, his location was not within the data collected. This can occur if a phone is turned off. This can occur if a phone is turned off. Yeah, you think? So what happens, Brett Payne, when people turn their phones off? They're committing crimes, right? Based on the information and the lack of data, we decided to interview them. So ISP, they were like, hey, we got to go look at these people because his phone's been turned off. People turn their phones off, it's a crime, according to Brett Payne. On December 9th, Herman and I interviewed them at their place of employment. She works for probably University of Idaho and had not sent in any tips regarding Gonzalez's employment with her as a babysitter. So they didn't send in any tips regarding that. Kept that quiet. They began the interview with her and asked her if Gonzalez had been babysitting for her or any other families. And she confirmed Gonzalez did babysit for her and may have babysat for another family, but wasn't sure. She told me her husband had introduced her, who coordinated child care for her, and stated there was approximately five sorority sisters who would provide child care for their children. And they stated the only way she paid the girls was via the Venmo app on her phone. And she stated Gonzalez had provided child care for them for a few weeks during the spring semester of 2022. She told us the last time Gonzalez babysat for them was on her 21st birthday. And she stated Gonzalez had babysat for them 5 or 6 times total. Stated they paid each girl $15 an hour for their work. Stated Gonzalez was not a full-time employee. And stated most of the work occurred during the week. Most of the work occurred during the week, and she wasn't a full-time employee. I asked her what a normal routine for her family was when there was a football game at home. Because he was a coach? And she explained that her and the family usually attend the home games, and the game on November 12th, they had family in town for the game. She stated she attended the game, then went home after, and told me she did not see any of the victims of the unalivings at the game. She told me her and her family, minus somebody, were at home when they found out about the unalivings that occurred near the university. She told me that somebody was in the office when the University of Idaho Kibble Dome when it was put into a lockdown situation. This doesn't make sense. This statement right here, and this doesn't make sense. She told me blank was in the office when the University of Idaho Kibble Dome when it was put into a lockdown situation. I think this really says she told me that she was in the office at the University of Idaho Kibble Dome when it was put into a lockdown situation. That was slick. I think she works in the University of Idaho Kibble Dome. I asked her about her personal interaction with Gonzalez. She described her as bubbly and a great person. She said the only time she ever saw her not happy was after her 21st birthday. That's the second time she's mentioned that 21st birthday. She told me Gonzalez arrived at her house to watch her children, appearing to be hungover. And she said she helped, which I can't get over this helped. She helped Gonzalez feel better. Whenever somebody says they helped them feel better getting over a hangover, it almost tells me that she gave Gonzalez some type of substance to make her feel better. I asked if there were any other applications other than a messaging application they used to communicate or schedule babysitting. She told me there wasn't. I asked how the girls who babysit were paid. She told me it was all through Venmo. She stated she was paying the girls $15 an hour to babysit. She never had any conversations with Gonzalez outside of babysitting, except for when Gonzalez arrived at her house to babysit on her 21st birthday. There's the third time she mentioned Gonzalez's 21st birthday. And anyway, she told me Gonzalez quit being a babysitter for her and learned Gonzalez had accepted a job as an intern from some sort of IT company. She told us that for the new job, Gonzalez was going to work remotely for the IT company and offered to continue watching the kids during the summer. She explained she learned the internship was 40 hours a week. That's where I get the 40 hours for the $27 an hour earlier. She told me the last time she had contact with Gonzalez was in July of 2022. Okay. Towards the end of the interview, I asked her if there was ever any inappropriate relationship between herself and Gonzalez. Whoa, he's thinking three-way here, y'all. Or between her husband and Gonzalez, or any inappropriate relationship of any of the other babysitters. They're thinking like I am. She told me there had never been any inappropriate relationship she was aware of. Whoa. There had never been one that she was aware of. But she told me that she had little to no interaction with any of the babysitters. The only one who ever attended dinner with the couple was somebody else. We then concluded the interview. I then contacted her husband and met with him at the Kibbe Dome on the University of Idaho campus, because obviously that's where they both work. And they agreed to sit down for an interview with us. At approximately 11:37, we began an interview with the husband. I explained why we wanted to talk with him, and he was not nervous, not afraid to speak with us. He explained he was a coach for the University of Idaho. He went on to explain he met somebody while working and asking if she'd be willing to babysit. And he agreed that is how he came to know Gonzalez. Even explained that after asking about babysitting, he didn't even save her phone number in his phone for obvious reasons. What obvious reasons are that, guy? And he appeared very conscious as how it may look if he was contacting female students. Oh, okay. Yeah, I bet you're very conscious of this interview. He stated he was not involved very much with the babysitting and did not handle any of the logistics of it. Outside of the something, he had little to no contact with the other babysitters and told us he had met Gonzalez maybe 2 times. Well, she babysitted 5 times, according to your wife. Any interactions he had with the babysitters was mostly in passing, I bet. And he confirmed that the statements of how they knew Gonzalez and how the babysitting operation was performed. When have you ever heard of a babysitting operation? He explained that after games, he would meet with somebody at a location off campus. And he told us on the day of the incident, he was notified of the unalivings when he was already in the Kibbe Dome game, planning for the next week. He was already planning for the next week. This is the football coach. We asked if he had seen any of the victims after the football game, or maybe an offensive, defensive coordinator, the night before they were found. He said he had not seen any of the victims after the game. I asked what he did after the game. He stated he went to the Best Western, as is custom after games with other people, and then he went home. Best Western is their custom after the games. What you doing at the Best Western, guy? I asked him what his contact was like with somebody. He told me his phone was always on and that he could reach out to him if needed, but was not standard. I asked if his phone was normally on 24/7. He said it was. After explaining the totality of the circumstance and the link between him and Gonzalez, well, if his phone was on 24/7, why did he turn it off that night? And I asked if he'd be willing to provide a DNA sample. We explained the sample is going to be used to rule out or match a person to any evidence that may be obtained. We also explained the DNA sample would not be placed into the national database. He ultimately, not he agreed willingly, he ultimately agreed. That means he agreed after some reservation. And we obtained a sample from him. That sample was later given to the Moscow Police Department and processed accordingly to their policies and procedures. Yeah, they intercepted this one. I also asked if he had any inappropriate relationships with any of the victims or students at the university. He denied any inappropriate relationships. There were no other tips or statements to say otherwise. That told me the only interaction he had with Gonzalez outside of babysitting was when she arrived at the house to watch the kids and she appeared hungover. When was that? On her 21st birthday. He told us his wife took care of her. We concluded our interview with him. So I think it's quite obvious that this person has had inappropriate relationships, in my humble opinion, with Kaylee Gonzalez, and any of his DNA that ended up on Kaylee Gonzalez, considering he's probably the football coach or heavily involved in the football program, would be something the university would not want anybody to know, in my humble opinion. Now, we also know from this statement that Kaylee was a very funny person, a prankster, very hardworking, and a person with positive energy. She had been in a long-term relationship with Jack Decor, but the two mutually separated. They shared the dog Murphy. Gonzalez may have been in a relationship with another young man who was Kernodle something. So it's quite obvious that Kaylee was playing the field. And she may have been playing the field with some people that they would not want anybody to know she was playing the field with. And I believe that would include coaches, possible professors, and a law enforcement officer. So you may ask, why do I think a cover-up would be necessary from the university and possibly law enforcement there in Moscow? Well, I think I just gave you the reasons why. Not because Rosie did the unaliving, not because this professor or coach did the unaliving, but because that professor or coach had likely, in my humble opinion, been with Kaylee recently, and they were very scared that their cell phone would prove that relationship, their DNA may prove that relationship, and I think the university would have been aware of it really fast when this thing went down and would want to cover up any relationship that one of the victims in this crime had to any high-ranking personnel with the university. Certainly frat boys wouldn't make any sense, but you can bet those types of people would. And I think it's really this one that I go back to where this friend of Kaylee says she was probably texting others to hang out as well that night. And that's when I believe she texted Officer Rosie. And I think all the evidence shows that maybe Kaylee had a meeting with Rosie that night, and after Rosie left, she was sitting there finally happy in that living room playing with Murphy, listening to music, dancing right before this all went down. Certainly a reason for Moscow PD to want to cover things up, and certainly a reason for the university to want to cover things up after the atrocity, y'all. Not everybody is a suspect. You got to think and take the totality of the evidence. If you think shallow, I just gave you 3 new suspects. If you take the totality of the evidence, I just showed you why they would cover up a crime. And was there evidence of a cover-up after the crime in the investigation? And I say, as it relates to Kaylee, there absolutely was. And again, when I go through these, it's the investigating agency that I think is interesting. Lawrence Mowry. And if you notice when you go through the MPD reports, they were only focused on, for some reason, Kaylee with all of these things. Like, for instance, her Tinder account. Now, a lot of people believe that they were focusing on this because Kaylee said she had a stalker. They were trying to figure out the connection with Kaylee because she had the most injuries, and it seemed personal with her. But when I look at this, I look at it from a completely different perspective. I look at it as an investigating agency trying to get out ahead of anything they could get out ahead of. They wanted her Tinder accounts and all the information to make sure there wasn't a connection to people that they didn't want people to know about. They were only concerned with Kaylee's Reddit. Again, I think they were wanting that information to get out in front if Kaylee had contacted those people that they didn't want anybody to know about. And then there's Kaylee's laptop, right? Didn't get it till December 12th. It was being used by Kaylee Gonzalez as a paid employee of Extreme Networks. They wanted that thing. They wanted to see what was on it, make sure that there wasn't any connection to those people they didn't want anybody to know about. But then there's things like this, right? Kodak Power Flash disposable camera. And on December 7th, they were processing the crime scene again, moving personal belongings. And in the bottom drawer, he located a Kodak Power Flash disposable camera and a GoPro camera in a small black pack zippered pouch. He brought the GoPro and the Kodak camera back to the police department prior to leaving the residence. He also took possession of the keys, all the vehicles belonging to the deceased. But he later contacted the investigative team and learned the memory card from the GoPro was seized. during a previous search of the residence, so the camera itself was of no evidentiary value. Now, who goes into a crime scene and sees a GoPro camera and only takes the memory card out of it and leaves the camera? Why wouldn't you take the whole camera as evidence and then process the memory card later if you weren't doing anything nefarious? Seems to me like they wanted to get that memory card out of that camera and go through it before anybody else to make sure there was nothing on it that needed to be covered up. And then there's the most striking one, in my opinion, and that was on the victim phone extractions. Do we see anything weird here? Well, they requested assistance unlocking the cell phones of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan. Now, this is law enforcement, y'all. If these cell phones are all locked, they should be able to get into all of them with no problem. It's law enforcement. But what happened? They asked Tyson Barrett in attempting to gain PIN codes from family members to access data on the devices. He was provided PIN codes for Mogan, Kernodle, and Chapin, which successfully unlocked the devices. The PIN codes provided for Gonzalez's phone, it did not unlock the device. Well, did they provide the wrong PIN codes, or were they just buying time to go through Kaylee's phone and make sure that they got rid of that information they didn't want anybody to see? Isn't it just a little bit too convenient for them to not be able to get into Kaylee's phone, but they could get into everybody else's? Give me a break. And then they would be able to complete limited extraction on Gonzalez's locked phone. So later on, after all that, they were only able to get a limited extraction on Gonzalez's locked phone. Well, what was the limited extraction about? Oh, it limited to the information that they wanted them to extract, and certainly not limited to that information they were trying to hide. Are you seeing where I'm getting at on the cover up after the crime? If not, maybe this will convince you. I've shown you now in many videos where they took fingernails of all the victims, and when they got the forensic results back, Maddie had DNA under her fingernails of an unknown perpetrator, Q13.1. Ethan had DNA under his fingernails of an unknown perpetrator, 6.1. Xana had DNA under her fingernails of an unknown perpetrator, 9.1. Showing all three fought back, Xana, Ethan, and Maddie. However, Kaylee, who had the most wounds from what we've been told, she was totally unrecognizable. Kaylee's fingernails, the swab of the right fingernail, the swab of the left fingernail, the DNA profiles obtained from 15.1 and 16.1 are consistent with that obtained from the known reference sample of Kaylee Gonzalez. So under Kaylee's fingernails, she had nobody's DNA except for hers. Now, how is it that Kaylee, who had the most injuries, didn't have any defensive DNA under her fingernails and the other three victims did? I think her sister tells us how that happened.
Know the motive. There's a lot that the prosecutor just doesn't know, but she did get a full list of wounds, and I think the presumption initially was that a lot of these wounds came because Kaylee was fighting back against Brian Koberger, and it seems now that may not be the case. Some of the wounds, and it's sort of just like disgusting to talk about, but when she says experimental, some of these wounds may have been Brian Koberger just stabbing in places and just almost like experimenting in a way, and some even after Kaylee was already dead. And some even after Kaylee was already dead. And some even after Kaylee was already dead.
Now, let's unpack that just for a minute. Because y'all all asked, why do you think that law enforcement and the university would move Kaylee and try to cover things up? Well, I think I've given you some pretty good reasons throughout this video. But then let's look at the straight up facts of the matter. Kaylee Gonzalez's sister went down, talked to prosecutors, asked for information. One of the pieces of information they gave her was that for some reason, Kaylee's wounds, nobody else's, just Kaylee's. She had post-mortem wounds. They called them experimental wounds by Brian Koberger. We know that's impossible based on the time frame. So who did these post-mortem wounds? Why did they do them? And if everybody in the house was attacked and fought back and had perpetrator DNA under their fingernails, but Kaylee, the one that was attacked the worst, had zero, not anybody else's DNA under her fingernails except for hers. Even Maddie had Kaylee's DNA under her fingernails, which is strange, but Kaylee didn't have any. Why? Well, because in my humble opinion, Kaylee was shot. She didn't have the ability to fight back anybody. So why was she moved to that third bedroom upstairs, and why did she have post-mortem wounds? Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti's out.
Oh, gonna give it a shot. Only one of me to shield you all from the enemy. You're a superhero. You're a superhero.